to the Clemson Dubcast. It is Tuesday, June 25th. Right now at TigerIllustrated.com, we're doing one of the more popular features of the summer and certainly one of the most enjoyable from my perspective, ranking the top 25 players on Clemson's roster, giving the latest updates on each of these guys. It is quite a challenge each year to do it. This year, certainly no exception, but we're getting close to the top 10 right now. So go to TigerIllustrated.com to dig into all of it. My good friends Blake Smith and Brooke Archenhold have been part of the podcast since the beginning, way back in August of 2018. They have an accomplished team of personal injury attorneys at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold based in Greenville. They are Clemson people, and their skillful attorneys have decades of experience in complicated litigation matters, taking a special interest in medical malpractice, nursing home abuse and neglect, car accident cases that have left the individuals involved in serious trouble. For a free consultation at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold, call 864-990-4581 or online at parhamlaw.com. That's P-A-R-H-A-M law.com. When you're ready for a complete renovation in your home or business, open the door to more with Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Their local experienced team will totally transform any room space, from beautiful floor coverings to construction to finished details. Harris handles every step of your renovation process, whether it's a kitchen or living room or an industrial or educational setting, like some of the positively stunning work they've done at Clemson University. Go to discoverharris.com and experience a total renovation transformation from Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Celero Communications, formerly known as Tandem Payment, is a full-service integrated electronic payments provider powered by leading-edge technology. Celero provides a wide array of merchant solutions, simplified payments. They make onboarding, taking payments, maintaining risk management and compliance, and getting support quick and easy. At Celero, they're all about helping you achieve sustainable growth as a business. Taking payments isn't the only thing your business needs. With Celero's solutions, you can manage inventory, sell products and services via social media, schedule staff, track sales, get reports, and much, much more. Find out more about Celero at celerocommerce.com. That's C-E-L-E-R-O commerce.com. Okay, to our interview with Billy Donlon, who's been at Clemson for 2 years and who goes way back with Brad Brownell. This guy has an amazing story, as you'll hear. Really enjoyed learning more about Billy. Here we go. Okay, joined by Clemson Associate Head Coach, basketball coach Billy Donlon. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate you having me. It's great to be on with you.
Yes, it's a pleasure to have you on. Tell everybody what you're up to. I guess you had camp last week, right? And you had practice today. Is that correct?
Yeah, we just finished our team workout a little while ago, and Coach had his camp last week. It was great, nearly 200 kids, and just for space availability, Coach caps it. But it was a great week. Kids have a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun, and I also think it's great. Most of our players, if not all of our players, Larry, work the camp, and it's good. They're coaching guys, and the shoe's kind of on the other foot. And I do think that actually helps in many ways.
Earlier this month, I think it was June 4th, sat down with Coach Brownell. We normally have a summer sort of extended sit down with him. I think that tradition goes back, to his maybe first summer here, maybe second summer. This one was a lot longer than usual. It was 2 hours long. I promise not to keep you that long. But it was just really fascinating to sort of get his window into the last couple of months after the extraordinary run to the Elite Eight. And what seems different now in the coaching profession is that there's really no time to sit back and admire what you just did, because you have to handle a lot of the portal stuff mainly in addition to the normal high school recruiting. Can you maybe give your window into what that's like from an assistant's point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Coach Brownell said is exactly right, and it's not exclusive to us at Clemson. But the further you go, this is I'd played on when I was at Michigan, we made it to the Sweet 16. The further you go, though, in the portal era, you really feel like you have no time, because your season's longer. And while we were certainly during our tournament run working as assistants on the portal, and transfers and those kinds of things, one of the biggest differences is all the other teams that have been eliminated, they have a much better feel for their roster because kids have already come in and said, hey, we're transferring. We're going to enter the portal. So they kind of knew the guys on their team who were leaving. We were still playing. We had no idea. We thought a player or two would leave because that's just college basketball. And so then you're kind of behind the eight ball because you don't know exactly what you need. Certainly we knew some things, but you don't know everything. And so you're a little bit later. And it's harder to pursue guys not knowing whether or not you're actually going to be pursuing them, if that makes sense. But you get very little time, and it's not a complaint. We all love our jobs. We all love being here at Clemson, and as a staff, getting to work for a coach is awesome. He's an incredible person, incredible boss, a great basketball coach. But yeah, you get very little time. You're gonna when we were preparing for Arizona in the Sweet 16 game, you're trying to sprinkle in phone calls. You're certainly staying connected with who goes in the portal. Lucas McKay does a great job of that, our director of recruiting. And then you're getting on the phone with people that you know. And what's become really important, I don't know if people, we have so many great fans. Other assistants on other staffs have become so important because that's who you're going to call. Those are going to be some of your first phone calls to find out about a person. Their work ethic, their character, all the immeasurable things. And, so your relationships in the profession with other assistants are also very, very important, probably more so now than ever, because you any kind of inside information you can get is critical in terms of making decisions with guys that you're either going to recruit or choose not to recruit out of the portal. But, yeah, very, very little room now. Now our time is the first couple weeks of August. We get a little bit of a break, potentially. Our players are gone from summer before they come back for the start of the school year in the fall. We don't have a lot of recruiting, and they made it a dead period after about the first 4 or 5 days of August. So that's kind of our time to get some, recovery. But, when you do what you love, it's great. The only thing is you probably don't get to enjoy when you do something special like this team did this year as much as maybe you'd like to in the moment.
Can you go back to the first, when you get back from LA and you're exhausted, you're proud, you're also disappointed because you were that close, and meanwhile you've got to really just devote yourself fully to, like you said, okay, who's staying, who's going, and how do we get replacements? Can you just take us back to that first week or two after you get back and what that was like just mentally?
Yeah, it's devastating. You're 40 minutes away. Like, the Final Four is probably the second most significant sporting event in our country behind the Super Bowl. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. Even, maybe the college football playoff, but I'm not sure. The Final Four is really special. And to be 40 minutes away from it, and certainly give Alabama credit. They're terrific. Their Coach Oates and their staff do a great job. But I also felt like we maybe left some things on the table that typically during the year we didn't. And that's just part of the game. And then also is they had an outlier. They had a 20% three-point shooter go 4 for 7 in Jaron Stevenson from 3. And that was a huge impact on the game. And so you're just devastated because you don't ever know. The goal is to get there. That's going to be what we're trying to do every year. But when you have the opportunity to play for the Final Four and then obviously play for a national championship, get that far, you want to take the advantage of it. You and I are old enough, Larry, to remember Dan Marino. He goes to the Super Bowl his rookie year, and you listen to him, and he thought that would just be the norm. That's what would just happen in his career. And then he never won again. And again, not a criticism. He's obviously a Hall of Fame quarterback, but you think about those types of things. So it is devastating in a lot of ways. And at the same time, as a coach trying to help young people, you don't want your players to think or look at you and say, man, coach is devastated, because what our guys did is significant, and you want them to celebrate it. and you don't want them to be down in the dumps about not winning that game against Alabama. Certainly, for the returners, you want it to be some motivation, but that will come in time. In the immediacy, you want them to feel good about what they did. And so that's also important. Is you got to kind of, whatever your inner emotions are, you've got to hide that to a degree from the guys, because you want them to feel good about what they did. And then in terms of, you're going to get right into the portal. I mean, we're on our phones constantly, text messages, phone calls, looking to see, whether you're on Twitter and you follow verbal commits, because I think they do as good a job as anybody of getting the immediate people in the portal. You're talking to agents, which really that's only happened the last 3 years. You're on the phone with agents and they're telling you this guy's going to go in, and so you're dealing with all those types of things, and then you're also dealing with your own roster. What was TJ Hall going to do? What's Chase Hunter going to do? And then how does that impact what we do moving forward? So you have all those types of questions that you got to answer. And, it's fluid. It's a very fluid situation. Things change. And so you've got to be really communicative as a staff with each other. And then you're watching a ton of film on players. You're watching a ton of film on what we call synergy that has all the games. And, whether you're watching clips, certain aspects of that player's games. And then, for us, we wanted to make sure we brought in the right kinds of people that fit the Clemson grit and the way that Coach runs the program.
What are some of the things you said the team left some things on the table in that final game that they hadn't during the season? Can you get into maybe some specifics on that?
Yeah, I think, we got off to a great lead. You have a double-figure lead early in the first half. And, obviously we all know Alabama wasn't going to go away, but there were they didn't make shots early. Some of it was our defense. Some of it was they didn't make shots, but they got us on the glass, which teams did not do through the course of the season. They really hurt us on the glass to get back in the game. So that was one factor, and that's a credit to them. We hurt them on the glass in the game at their place, and there was no question that an emphasis was winning the glass for them. And, if you go to the second half, I talked about the 3-point shooting from Jaron Stevenson, and, we missed some free throws. We missed some front ends of one-on-ones, which is like going 0 for 2. We missed at least 2 of those, which is very unlike us. So it was some of those things. And there's, in preparation as a coach, I would tell you, I wish I'd done a better job of when you play Alabama, you can't help early. And if there's a guy between the ball and the rim, so if the defender is what looks like slightly beat, but the defender is still between him and the rim, you can't come to help because they live on that. They thrive on that. And we did a great job of that in game 1 when we played at their place. And I lose sleep at night because I did not do a good job in terms of my responsibility of really emphasizing that. And that hurt us. That cost us a couple threes. And in a game like that, where with under 4 media, it's a 1-possession game, all those things come back and haunt you. And that's just part of losing. I'll remember a lot more from the Alabama game in 10 years than I will the Arizona game. I think that's that's kind of the burden of being a coach. You remember very little from the wins, and you remember an awful lot from the losses.
Not to get into too much rehash of the final game, but you mentioned the free throws. I believe it was 3 of 11 in the second half. I think that's right. And you mentioned front ends. Did the just the cumulative effect of the emotional wave that you guys were on, not just the physical but the emotional, is it valid to maybe say, okay, maybe they were just a little, maybe the overall experience sort of showed up in their legs at that point in the second half of that game, or not?
You know what, Larry? I think that's a possibility. What I really truly believe was a huge factor was, not in a game of that magnitude, but there are games where you get off to a great lead, and our guys didn't think it was going to be easy. But it's kind of like when you run a race. If you run a longer race, a 5K, or if you've ever run a marathon, and you're doing pretty well, and maybe you're kind of running, and somebody's behind you. they've been behind you for a long time, and then they pass you, and whatever reason, you lose all your wind. Like you have a hard time finding that second wind, and it's much more challenging just to finish. Never mind finish at your best or finish close to your best. That person passing you kind of takes the wind out of your sails. And I think the way Alabama came back in the first half after we built that lead, I think it was a little of that. I think it took the wind out of our sails, and it was challenging for us to get back to the level of play we needed in order to actually win the game. And I think it was more that than the emotion of playing in the Elite Eight and everything that we had been through. I think it was just what took place within the game. I think if we went in the locker room with a 6, 7, 8 point lead, it would have been different. Hey, Alabama cut it. We were up 13. They cut it in half. Hey, they're going to make a run. Good teams make a run. But I think the fact that they came back and took the lead within the first half really took the wind out of our sails. We lost our breath, and it was hard to get our breath back at the level that was needed to win, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Brad said, as of our conversation, that he still had yet to watch the replay of that game, and the reason was he wanted to get past the emotions of it. It was still just too painful, and he wanted, when he does sit down, he wants to actually learn from it and to look at it objectively. How about you? Have you been able to sit back and take it in again?
Yeah, I watched it. I watched it one time, and I watched it to Coach's point. It was just way too emotional, and so I watched it once. I watched that with our Boston College tournament loss, and our Notre Dame end of the season loss. So I watched those 3 games, and I had no problem evaluating the Notre Dame and Boston College games. But Alabama's harder. It's a harder one. And so I'm probably a little more time will go by, and I'll watch it and be able to watch it with a coaching eye without nearly as much emotion.
Can I ask you to reflect on something Brad said in the turnaround from the Boston College loss in the ACC tournament to the selection show? It struck me as being a pretty deft coaching move in terms of sort of managing the psyche of your team, in that really hard on the guys for 2 days when you guys got back, really, really hard on them, as you guys should have been, given that head-scratching performance in D.C. But then it was, okay, it's over, and we're moving on, and we're going to celebrate on Sunday during the selection show because we had a season worthy of celebration. And that really seemed to, from the outside looking in at least, to be a key sort of move of, okay, we're going to be all up in you guys for a couple of days, but then we're just going to move on and things are going to be positive. Interested to get your perspective on that, just as a coach, just from all your years of being in the business.
Yeah, I think Coach was hard on everybody, Larry, and rightfully so, justifiably so. The staff, myself, the Coach Bender, Coach Dixon, Coach McKay, Coach Reynolds, Coach McIntyre, GAs, everybody, and we all deserved it. When you have a performance like that, and Coach was hard on himself too. It's not, Coach Brownell is not the kind of person. He looks in the mirror. He self-reflects. He's self-accountable, both in front of the team and also in front of his coaching staff. But on this one, the Boston College loss, everybody, if you didn't look in the mirror first, if you didn't point fingers at yourself first individually, then you're probably not made of the right stuff. And everybody here is made of the right stuff. The players, the coaches, and that starts with Coach. And he was hard on us, and he handled it perfectly. There's situations you'll remember, and we needed it. Our team needed it. We needed a couple really hard days. And, I think sometimes people act like adversity is good. Going through hard things can be really beneficial. It's the whole pain is weakness leaving your body. That old quote that used to be around forever. Sometimes we got to go through pain, not in a way that degrades an individual, but hey, Boston College they didn't just punch us in the mouth. They knocked us out. We didn't get back up. It was like, I'm a big movie guy. It was like Rocky III when Clubber Lang, played by Mr. T, just, beat the snot out of Sylvester Stallone, beat the snot out of Rocky. There was no place to go but to look in the mirror, and we handled it great. And then, for Coach to also have the wherewithal and the understanding that, hey, this team has accomplished some really good things. We're going to be picked on Sunday, and they need to enjoy that experience, because the year before, and we had many returners, many guys that were on the year before, where we got screwed. I don't care what anybody tells me. A 14-6 ACC team is better than an 11-9 Big Ten team. And I coached in the Big Ten every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And I don't want to hear about analytics and metrics and this. A 14-6 ACC, when 3 out of the last 4 years, the ACC has been the best league in the NCAA tournament. At some point, that is not just a coincidence. At some point, 3 out of 4 years, that is not just a coincidence. And it isn't just Duke and North Carolina. NC State went to the Final Four. Miami went to an Elite Eight, then a Final Four. It isn't just the quote-unquote blue bloods. Our league is tremendous, tremendously good. And I don't care what the mathematical, analytical people say. There's plenty of evidence on our side of the street. And so what happened with our guys, we got cheated out of and I put cheated in quotes, we got gypped out of the NCAA tournament a year ago. And Coach knows everybody went through that pain. We all went through that pain. And the Sunday this year needed to be celebrated. And it was. And the way he handled it was, it couldn't have been done any better. And I think the proof is in the pudding with both, if you ask the kids, the players, and then how we performed in the tournament. We played our best basketball in the NCAA tournament for sure, bar none, against the best competition. And, it was hard. It was a grind when we got back from D.C., but we were all embarrassed. Everybody was embarrassed. And that's not to take anything away from Boston College. They're great. It would have been different, Larry, if it was a game that came down to the final possessions, because a lot of our games with Boston College, they do come down to the final possessions. That is not what happened. We were embarrassed, and we needed to get that taste out of our mouth. And the only way to do that is to work and to grind and to do it together. And that's what we did. And I think there was an understanding when everybody looked at everybody in the eyes. It was like, yeah, we need this. Like, we deserve to go through this. And hopefully there'll be a payoff on the other side. And there was.
You coached the guards. What was your sort of evaluation or expectation or feel for Chase Hunter going into the NCAA tournament after he was so poor against Boston College?
Well, big picture, I told Chase and Joe, if you really look at the last 10 league games in the ACC when we were 7-3, I dare you to find a better backcourt in the country than what Chase and Joe did the last 10 games. Look at the numbers, look at the winning, look at who we beat, look at where we beat them. And that's half of our league season. So it's not a small sample size. And what I told Chase and Joe privately was, when you play a little too cool for school, you're going to get put in your place. And that's what happened to all of us. I said, I did a bad job coaching you, helping in my role. I was probably a little too cool for school, and we played that way. And ironically, Jaden Zachary and the other guys at Boston College, they really took us to the mattresses. And, it was a great learning experience. I thought Chase, when you look at Chase Hunter's career, anytime he has adversity, he's always responded well, very well. So I thought he'd play well. I didn't know he would play as well as anybody in the NCAA tournament up till the Elite Eight game. But, man, he played really well. And it didn't surprise me because he does put in the time. He's a hard worker. He's a willing learner. It was his 5th year last year, and he was still a very willing learner. And so it didn't surprise me, and I'm glad that people around the nation could see just exactly how good he is when he plays to his potential.
He transitioned to point guard a year ago, last season, before this past one, your first season. I'd love to pick your brain on that evolution of him learning how to play point guard, learning how to, I guess, one of the priorities, of course, is keeping your body in the right type of shape, just given how much you're defending at the top and just all that goes into switching to playing point guard on a more full-time basis.
Yeah, and there's a lot. You've addressed several of the things that go on when you move over to that position, especially when you play for Coach Brownell. And I mean this in the best possible way. You really are an extension of him on the floor. And so there's a lot that goes into that. You know, we run great stuff offensively. Coach Brownell and Coach Bender and Coach Reynolds do an unbelievable job with that. And we have some great stuff. It's a great, Larry, I'd be remiss. This is an outstanding coaching staff. When you go through, Sean Dixon is tremendous. Obviously, Coach Bender is tremendous. He should be a head coach. Jeff Reynolds has been a head coach. Terrell McIntyre is not only is he an all-time great at Clemson, he's an all-time great in Europe. Anytime we go on a foreign trip and you wear Clemson, or I went to Turkey and went recruiting 2 summers ago and obviously was wearing the Clemson stuff, people were coming up to me, Clemson, Terrell McIntyre. So it's and then Lucas McKay, his work ethic, the amount of people that he knows, his loyalty to Coach and to Clemson. It's an excellent staff. And so Chase was fortunate to be moved to point guard because I think it's going to help his professional career. And he took it in stride because he also, Chase has a scoring mentality, and he was going to have to learn to balance that more than if he remained off the ball. And that was something that Coach Brownell really communicated that with him. And then the other piece, and you addressed it, was, the last 2 years, Brevin was fine. Brevin Galloway was a good player, but he was fine guarding the ball. He wasn't great. And obviously Joe wasn't great. They both competed, but Chase had to guard the best guy every night too. I mean, he's got to guard RJ Davis. He's got to guard, sometimes the other team's point guard's not guarding Chase. They're guarding somebody else. So there was a lot to Chase's game that he had to adjust to, and he's made the adjustments. He took too many mid-range jump shots, and that's something that everybody on our staff talked with him about, that he could go deeper and make it an easier shot. And I think that was another corner he turned that showed up in the NCAA tournament. His rim finishing, his floaters, his runners, pull-ups that he got to the paint as opposed to 17 feet made a huge difference in his game. He's just made all the changes, and he is incredibly coachable. He comes with the same demeanor. He's going to give you everything he's got at every practice, every workout. And it's been, I'll certainly, we'll miss him as a player after this season for sure, but I'll really miss him, the person, when it's all said and done.
He had to, of course, a year ago undergo an adjustment when Joe Girard got here. That's not the easiest thing in the world, even, and not for selfish reasons, but just, dealing with, okay, who's going to be the guy? Who's going to be the scorer? And you've got this great shooter that's now in the fold. Can you maybe reflect on that and how now he can use that experience, how much that experience sort of makes him wiser now with the addition of Jaden Zachary?
Well, I think, last year at that time, Chase told Coach, get the best possible player you can get. Chase was all in after not making the NCAA tournament. He just wanted to win. And I think it actually helped that Joe was in the league because Chase had great familiarity with him in the league, playing against him a handful of times over their careers. Chase having to guard Joe, I always teach Joe, you would never guard Chase. That would not go well for you. But Chase certainly had to guard Joe. And I think Chase was excited to have that level of a shooter because it was going to open up the space for him and for the game and for our whole team. And so he welcomed Joe with open arms. And in fact, when Joe came on his official visit, Joe's girlfriend came on the visit. And Joe and his girlfriend and Chase and his girlfriend, they all hung out. PJ and they all hung out, the 6 of them. And you could tell that, when you watch people kind of hang out for the first time, Larry, you can tell if it's forced or if there's flow, and there was great flow. It wasn't forced at all. And, we thought if Joe decided to come, that those guys would get along really, really well. And that is what happened. And certainly I think with Jaden, he's excited about Jaden. I think, look, we've lost 2 of the last 3 times we played Boston College, we've lost. And, we lost we were 10-1, I think, the year before we went up. It was when Brevin Galloway had the more famous testicular injuries in the history of the world. We went to Boston and Brevin didn't get to play against his former team and they beat us. And then, this year when we beat them at home, they had that, I think, food poisoning or flu issue. And several guys didn't play. And that was impactful. So we won that one, and then we played him in the tournament. So Chase has great respect for Jaden, and Jaden has great respect for Chase. And I think certainly that our backcourt won't be identical. We'll probably have some areas where we'll miss Joe, but we'll certainly have some areas where Jaden will do some things that were not maybe strengths of Joe. And it's our job, and there's nobody better than Coach Brownell at figuring out how to make sure that Jaden and Chase are playing together as cohesively as possible.
Was there a chance after the season in you guys' minds that PJ could have come back? You seemed to sort of intimate that earlier and saying you really didn't know what PJ and Chase were going to do at one point.
I think everybody. I'm an eternal optimist, and so I wanted PJ to do what he thought was best for him. But outside of that, optimistically, I was hopeful that there was a chance, but there was really no chance. I mean, PJ, it's what he wanted, and good for him. He was chasing his lifelong dream. So no, I mean, there was very, very little chance, if any, that he was going to come back. But at that time, after we lost, I was hopeful. Maybe there's an outside chance you get a taste of the Elite Eight. It's like, let's come back for one more. Let's replace a couple of the pieces we need to replace, and let's get the Final Four. Let's do the Final Four. And, obviously, PJ, that wasn't the decision he made, and I totally get it, respect it, appreciate it. So fortunate to have been been a part of a program that PJ's been here for 2 years. But yeah, I mean, the optimist in me, was maybe hopeful that it could happen. But it didn't happen and probably was never going to happen.
It's early, late June, but sitting here right now, what's the biggest question about this team for 24-25, just sort of big picture?
I would say the biggest question is how well, for 2 straight years, we've been really proficient at shooting threes. Our 3-point shooting has been really good, both in numbers, both in the different types of players that make them. And so I think that'll be, I don't know. I don't know if we'll measure up, and that could be a question, for certain. Will we measure up? We could, but I'm not sure if we will or not yet. I would tell you that in June. So that to me is probably the biggest thing offensively. And then defensively, we have a lot of guys that can really get after the basketball, and we have to have a willingness to do that. And that, if they have the ability to get after the ball, that's going to be our job to make sure there's a willingness and an understanding of why we need to get after the ball. We didn't really get after the ball the last 2 years, and that was the way to go. That was the way to play with our personnel. But this personnel is different, and so I think if we have a willingness to get after the ball, we could be pretty disruptive defensively, and that can help us because it can create easy baskets. It can frustrate the other team. Nothing frustrates it. Larry, you've been interviewing coaches forever. Nothing frustrates a head coach more than turnovers. And so if you can turn people over, it becomes very frustrating for the other team and for the other coach. And that just trickles down. And that's true anywhere. So I think that could be a great positive for us. And then also, can we make threes around the same percentage at the same number of makes that we have these last 2 years?
So faster defensively, basically.
Yeah, I think trying to limit ball movement, play a little quicker that way, which will lead to quicker offensively. I think that's where, Coach Brownell deserves an incredible amount of credit for how diverse he is as a coach and how he's adjusted to the modern game. Our tempo went from being in the bottom of the league to now. My first year back, we were the second fastest playing team in the ACC. I'd have to look it up this year. I think we were fourth or fifth. So Coach has done an unbelievable job of adjusting to modern day basketball. He's as good of a teacher as you'll find. And I don't think we'll change in terms of the pace in which we'll try to play offensively because it's been so good for us.
Upstate foodies, want to take a moment to talk to you about our favorite taco spot, Willie Taco. 5 locations across the upstate. This award-winning team has been serving up fresh taco fusion for a solid decade now. The chefs at Willie Taco utilize the freshest, most creative, and sometimes unexpected ingredients in their kitchens. Come see why Southern Living, Garden and Gun, and Food and Wine Magazine are raving about Willie Taco and their signature offerings, such as their Southern Tide, Crispy Avocado, Nashville Hot Chicken Tacos, literally flavors you will not find anywhere else, folks. And don't forget about the cocktails. Super fresh margaritas, ice cold cerveza, and over 80 tequilas served up daily from behind the bar. So don't wait, folks. Your Willie Taco Familia is ready to serve you up their twist on funky, fresh fusion. It's the Willie way. Another loyal supporter of the Dubcast is Blackacre Law Firm in Greenville, a subsidiary of Parham Smith and Archambault. Blackacre helps South Carolina residents achieve their dreams of home ownership by providing experienced professional representation for real estate closings. Attention to detail is crucial in real estate law. Blackacre is committed to making sure nothing gets by them preparing residential or commercial closings. Blackacre also offers estate planning services for their clients in the Greenville area. Find out more about Blackacre at 864-326-3507. Want to share a quick word about Founders Federal Credit Union? If you've been to a sporting event in Clemson, you've probably heard about Founders already. They are the official credit union partner of the Clemson Tigers. In addition to that, all Clemson faculty, staff, and students are eligible for membership as well as IPTAY members. Its office is located beside the Walmart Neighborhood Market on Old Greenville Highway in Clemson. For more information, go to foundersfcu.com. Billy, I've spent a couple of hours listening to interviews you've done in the past, and I've got to say, as much as I've enjoyed talking about basketball, your life story is really remarkable. And I don't even know where to start. I guess we could start when your grandparents came over from Ireland. You're a second generation American. That's correct?
Yeah, I am. I'm really as you get older, Larry, you learn how meaningful that really is. You learn if you knew my dad's story, which I really didn't know through childhood. He didn't talk about it much. I learned it much more as an adult, and I learned it a lot when we lived together. When I took over at Wright State for coach, after my second year, my third year, I hired my dad as operations. And, for people who don't know, it wasn't nepotism. My dad is one of the best basketball coaches that nobody will ever, the public won't get to know. He was a great high school coach. He went to Providence College. He was an assistant for Joe Mulaney. And then Pitino, he's the one that assembled that 87 Providence Final Four team with Billy Donovan and all those guys. Those were all my dad's recruits. Then he went to Northwestern to be Bill Foster's assistant, the former coach at Duke. And he's still, I give Chris Collins a hard time. I'm pretty sure this is still accurate. The last first-round draft pick out of Northwestern was recruited by my dad, Evan Eschmeyer from New Knoxville, Ohio. Tremendous coach. So we lived together. My mom had died in 2010, so this was 2013. My mom died of triple-negative breast cancer. And it was during that time I learned so much about my dad. He had a major speech impediment growing up as a kid, like awful, really bad. In a time, in the 50s and the 60s where, speech pathology and where we are now isn't where we were then. And so it was really hard. He got thrown out of high school as a freshman. And my grandparents, who, again, they came over to Ellis Island from Ireland. And they found the money to send him to a boarding school in Rhode Island, and it changed his life. And he fell in love with basketball, being a New Yorker. That's what kids did. They, on one street, on one block, the Irish lived, the Italians on the next block, the African Americans on the next block, the Hispanics on the next block, and everybody met at the playground. Some guys played handball, some guys played stickball, and a lot of guys played basketball. And you learn so much playing pickup basketball. And he fell in love with the game, and he went to junior college in Iowa and then got a scholarship from there to RPI, Richmond Polytechnical Institute, which is now VCU. And he would play in the league, he played against Earl the Pearl. And I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but I think the point will be made. He had like 37 on Earl the Pearl, but Earl the Pearl had like 55 on him. So I tell my dad, hey, when you tell that story, just tell people you had 37 on Earl the Pearl. You don't need to like give Earl the Pearl his numbers, but it's pretty good. So he could really shoot it, but he's an amazing father. Been really blessed, to have him. And then my mom's side, my grandfather was a New York City police detective for 25 years. He was an Irish tenor. He sung the national anthem at Yankee Stadium. He played baseball and basketball at St. John's. But my favorite just side thing about my grandfather, in order to make a little extra money, he would do bodyguarding on the side. And when Liz Taylor and Alfred Hitchcock would come to New York, they would request my grandfather. Alfred Hitchcock was actually in my grandparents' apartment. So I always found that fascinating. And then I growing up, I started watching all the Rear Window and North by Northwest and a lot of the Hitchcock movie. It made me kind of a Hitchcock movie fan.
And I'm not a historian, but my understanding, the biggest migration from Ireland, of course, was the potato famine. That's 1800s. Your grandparents were obviously later than that. Were you told the story of why they came and what the circumstances were, and then where they lived in New York?
They lived in Queens, so they lived in Sunnyside, Queens, and Rockaway, Queens, which is, Rockaway is right off the water, like Bell Harbor and in that area. And my grandparents also came because of famine.
Oh, okay. Same. And then you said your father was thrown out of high school because of the speech impediment, mainly just because there was.
He won't give me that detail. I don't know what he did. It certainly was on him. He's probably going to get mad that I put this is out in the open. But his freshman year of high school, he did some things. Nothing like. I think he was not going. He was cutting school, is I think what happened, and eventually, so he was going to a Catholic high school, I think it was in New York, and they moved him out, and my grandparents certainly didn't give up on him, and said, you know what, they sent him to I'm blanking on the name of the school. I used to know it. It still exists, Mount St. Charles Academy, Mount St. Charles, and it's kind of militant in its background, and that really helped my dad, really helped him, and that's where he went for 3 years. And my father is as organized and detailed a person as you'll find. And you'd never know, Larry, if you talk to my dad, that he ever had a speech impediment to the degree in which he had it. It's really remarkable what he's done with his life as a first generation, and my dad has two siblings. Well, my uncle passed away, and then my aunt, and then all three of them were college graduates. So think about that. Your parents come over, they immigrate over, and all three become college graduates. My aunt is a nurse practitioner in New York City, and so just really been really lucky with the family that I was born into.
Why do you think it took so long for him to share with you the history?
I honestly don't think it was intentional. I think, we talked a lot about the coaching side of it, his career as a high school coach in Long Island. Like when he was in Long Island, Bob McKillop was a coach in the league. And Ralph Willard was a coach in the league. So those three guys. And that's why I tell you, my dad's as good as anybody. He just made a bad decision with his career. But it's funny. I'll tell you, this is one of my favorite stories. And it wasn't even my dad that told it to me. So about 10, 11, 12, 13 years ago, I was sitting at a summer game watching a kid play with Coach McKillop. And he's like, hey, how's your dad? And I knew they coached against each other. I think my dad was at a school called Maria Regina, and I think Coach McKillop was at Holy Trinity, and Coach Willard was at St. Dominic's. And one of Coach McKillop's best players of all time was Matt Doherty. played at North Carolina, and as you know, and so one of Coach McKillop's best teams in the playoffs was upset by my dad's team. And on my dad's team, his point guard married Coach McKillop's sister. Okay. And so Coach McKillop was like telling me this story, and he goes, every Thanksgiving, I got to listen to my brother-in-law tell me how your dad out-coached me, ran circles around me when they upset my team. And first of all, think about the humility with Coach McKillop, sharing that story. But we just had stories like that, that we talked about. And, and so I did not know. I knew about his time at Mount St. Charles, but I did not know about why he ended up going there.
So he was at Providence. I guess he got there in '82, and you said he recruited basically the whole team that ended up going to the Final Four in '87. He left the year before the Final Four season to go to Northwestern?
That's right. They lost in the Elite Eight in the NIT. So Coach Pitino's first year, they made an immediate turnaround. Elite Eight right away. In fact, I'll never forget it. Matt Palazzi missed a baseline jumper. I was a ball boy. If he makes it, they would have gone to the Final Four, the NIT Final Four. And, my dad's a real loyal guy. And Bill Foster, my dad used to run Coach Foster's camps in the Poconos. Coach Foster had camps in the Poconos, and he's a great coach and a great man. And, when my dad was coaching high school basketball in Methuen, Massachusetts, it was early 80s, and our economy was really struggling. And so schools in Massachusetts, the public schools, they had to riff some teachers. And the way they did it was the teachers that had been at the schools for the least amount of years in each department. So my dad was a history teacher, but he'd only been at Methuen for like 3-4 years, maybe 5. And he was the lowest ranking history teacher by years on the totem pole. And so he got let go, and he was out of a job. And Joe Mulaney was the Providence coach, who actually was Coach Larinaga's college coach. So Coach Mulaney led Providence to a Final Four in the early 70s, then became an NBA coach. And this was his second stint back at Providence. And back then, Larry, there were only 2 assistants. You only had 2 assistants. You didn't like all the amount of guys we have now. I call it the hallway. In the hallway, it's incredible. It's why the game has evolved the way it has, is because you just have more people that can get more work done, sharing ideas, collaborating. Back then you only had 2 assistants and the head coach. And so Coach Mulaney had an opening, and Coach Mulaney didn't have, he really only had 1 or 2 guys in college that he talked to. And one of them was Bill Foster, was Coach Foster. And so when Coach Mulaney called Coach Foster said, you need to hire Bill Donlon. You need to hire my dad. And that got my dad the job at Providence. And he worked for Coach Foster, I think, for 3 years he worked for Coach Mulaney, I think, for 3 years or 4 years. They got let go. My dad, there's the famous camp, the 5-star basketball camp. That was started by Will Klein and Howard Garfinkel. My dad was one of the original workers. And back then, 5-star was everything. Coaches, Bob Knight worked it, Pitino worked it, Hubie Brown. I mean, the amount of guys, Coach Krzyzewski, the players that went through 5-star, Ewing, Jordan, everybody went through it. And so, my dad was one of the original guys at that camp, and that helped him because it gave him some credibility. It helped him in recruiting. And so when they got fired, when Coach Mulaney was let go, they hired this young up-and-coming coach from Boston University in Rick Pitino. And Coach Pitino keeps my dad. Again, there's only 2 positions. And I think it actually gone up to 3. But so Coach Pitino keeps my dad, and they had this amazing turnaround. And, part of that story, and this is another story, is, Billy Donovan was transferring. And my dad had a great relationship with Coach Donovan and with Coach Donovan's parents, his mom and dad. And when they hired Coach Pitino, my dad convinced the Donovans, hey, this is the guy. Stay here and play. This is going to be great. And Coach Donovan will tell you to this day, like that, them listening to my dad's advice obviously worked out tremendously well for everybody involved. Coach Donovan has a great career, leads Providence to a Final Four. Coach Pitino, his what he's accomplished is well documented. So, but why I share the Coach Foster part, and it's played a role in my life. My dad's decisions has played a role in my choices. Coach Foster becomes the coach at Northwestern after that first year at Providence under Coach Pitino. And Coach Foster calls my dad and says, I need you. I think we can win here. And up until Chris Collins, Northwestern is like, it's a trap door. You go out there, it's a beautiful campus, it's on the lake, there's great people, and everybody thinks you can do it. But nobody was able to do it. And, my dad went out there, and there was a couple times where they were close, but they didn't get it done. But he left. He left on his own, and, Providence went to the Final Four the next year. And I tell people all the time, that next year you were able to add staff members. So the guys on the staff, when my dad was there, the GA was Herb Sendek. My mom, obviously Coach Sendek wrote it, but my mom typed his thesis. Like young people listening, what do you mean typed it? Yeah, you didn't have computers back then. You had to write it, and then your rough draft would be your handwritten copy, and then you would either type it yourself or give it to somebody to type for you, which is what Coach Sendek did with my mom. And the other people on staff, Stu Jackson, who's now the commissioner of the West Coast Conference, Gordon Chiesa, who became the coach at Providence, and then went on to be with Jerry Sloan with the Utah Jazz for like 20 years, and then Jeff Van Gundy. And I tell people all the time, and this is a biased son, Larry, but I tell people all the time, I'm not saying my dad was the best of those coaches, but I promise you he wasn't the worst. And when you look at all those people's careers, really pretty amazing. And so, in our profession, if you make a bad decision, it can cost you everything. And that's what happened to my dad. And that's why, I spent 8 years with Coach Brownell, and I knew how special he was. And I had opportunities to leave, to go from a one bid league to a multiple bid league as an assistant. And I never left because I never wanted to leave. I knew how special Brad was. And I learned that through my dad's poor choice. I knew that if you're working for somebody who's really special, don't leave them and it'll pay off. And certainly in my career, that's happened.
What was it like living in the Chicago area from in the late 80s, early 90s, when the Bulls are doing some rather important things with some guy named Michael Jordan? I had to have to imagine those were pretty formative memories for you.
Oh, amazing. And I grew up we basically moved to Northbrook, which is one town away from Deerfield, and Deerfield's important because that's where the multiplex is. And it's a sports club. The multiplex was a sports club, it has all the fitness exercises, free weights, and it had a gym. And it's where the Bulls practiced. The Bulls practiced at this place called the multiplex. And here I am, this 14-year-old kid. I would go into the multiplex, shoot, play pickup, and then I would occasionally watch practice. And one day, Horace Grant and Scottie Pippen took me to lunch. And I didn't tell my mom, so I wasn't old enough to drive. And I was so excited when they invited me to lunch because I was around all the time. I was there every day for multiple hours a day. And, the Bulls players, I never really got to, really talk to Michael, but all the other guys were great to me. And one day I'm in there shooting, after the Bulls finished practicing, and Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant come out of the locker room from showering, and they come back in the gym, and they're like, "Hey," I don't even think they knew my name. They're like, "Little fella, you want to come get lunch?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love to." And so we go get lunch, and but I didn't. My mom was supposed to pick me up at a certain time, and I just totally forgot about it because I'm like, holy cow, I'm getting ready to go to lunch with Horace Grant and Scottie Pippen. And so go to lunch. They're great. And they drive me home. There's 2 police cars outside the front of my house because my mom thinks I've been kidnapped. Because I was like 3 hours late from when she was picking me up. And, there weren't really cell phones back then. So it was hilarious as I'm getting out of the car. You get my mom. And but I had I was really blessed. My childhood, I was really lucky. And to be in Northbrook, I had an amazing high school coach in Brian James, who was also Chris Collins' high school coach. I've been around some great coaches. I was really, really lucky. Basketball has been very, very good to me.
John Shire played at the high school too, right?
John did. Yeah. John, Chris, and I all there. And, Chris was, tongue in cheek. When I left Kansas City to come here, Chris was like, man, don't do that. And again, tongue in cheek, because it would have been pretty special to have 3 guys from the same high school all be Division I head coaches. That probably doesn't happen very often at the same time. John was taking over for Coach Krzyzewski. Obviously, Chris was at Northwestern, and then I was at Kansas City. So, it's really pretty amazing what Glenbrook North, our high school, has had a ton of Division I players since Chris. He got it started for sure. And basketball in that town is, I don't want to say it's a religion, but it's pretty significant.
Can you give your take on the endless argument on today's NBA players versus back in my day, back in our day, the 80s and 90s? I don't know, not that my opinion matters, but I don't know, maybe the right take is there are some guys who would be from that era who would be perfectly fine in this era. And there are some guys from this era where it would apply as well. What's your take? It just seems like such a different game now with the number of players 6'9" and above who are now basically point guards and face up 3-point shooters and creating. It just doesn't seem there were that many guys back in those days. That's sort of my awkward way of.
I think that point is very true. There are bigger, more skilled, taller guys that are more skilled. The back to the basket 5-man it's not non-existent, but it's an endangered species for sure in our game. But what I do take issue with is I'll name one of the Bulls teams. So Michael Jordan, Ron Harper, Scottie Pippen, and Dennis Rodman. Those were 4 of the 5 starters. There's not a team in the modern game that can say they were more athletic than those 4 guys. Even if you want to take that great Golden State Warrior team, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson are not more athletic than any 4 of those guys. They're not more athletic than Jordan. They're not more athletic than Ron Harper. They're not more athletic than Dennis Rodman. People sometimes, I think it's good to remember when the Pistons, the bad boys, used to beat the Bulls, Dennis Rodman guarded Michael Jordan. Mm-hmm. People like as great of a rebounder as Dennis Rodman was, he was also an elite defender. So I think athletically, I don't think the guys in the 90s were behind today's guys. I think the game has changed for sure. I think the skill level, the shooting, some of the analytic things, and also, to be fair, the way the game is called has totally changed. And there are those differences. But I think the guys that played in the 90s could very easily play and excel in today's game. And a great discussion would be, I actually heard Shaq and Draymond Green I listened to their podcast driving. I was driving from Birmingham to Atlanta over the weekend recruiting. And I listened to that podcast and, Draymond's like, yeah, we would kill your teams because you can't guard the pick and roll. And it was Shaq's like, well, who's going to guard me? And, so it was great. It was a great conversation.
So how did you end up at Wright State?
I went with Coach. I was with Coach. I was with Coach.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was reading Wright State. I'm sorry. I meant to say UNC-Wilmington. How did you end up going to UNC-Wilmington to play for Coach Wainwright?
Yeah, so Coach Wainwright was a longtime 5-star coach. So he knew my dad. My recruitment was all over the place. I had low major Division I. I had Boston College offered me. Colorado State offered. I had some high major offers, and I did not sign early. I signed late. We had a great year my senior year. Our team was really, really good. I had a good season, and I was getting ready to commit to Boston College. Actually, till Paul Biancardi, he was an assistant at Boston College for Coach O'Brien at the time. Paul and I still laugh about this story. It's where I wanted to go. My dad coached at Providence. We lived in Bethune, which is a suburb of Boston. I'm an Irish Catholic kid. Would have loved to have gone there. And the night before my official visit, Coach O'Brien called me and said, we just got another commitment. And it was heartbreaking. And, so I kind of started over. Coach Wainwright in the spring or late winter started calling. He was the high school coach at Highland Park High School, which is in the league with Glenbrook North. And at the time, his former assistant was the head coach. And Coach Colsey is his name. And Coach Colsey called Coach Wainwright and said, you need to recruit this kid. And I went on a visit. It was a 19-hour visit because I had to get back to Chicago to play in an all-star game. And, the beach, it's 5 miles from the beach. I'm 18 years old, 9 months of the year. The girls are going to be in bikinis. I would love to tell you at 47 that wasn't a factor. It really wasn't a factor. What I learned on my visit is I thought I could go to Wilmington and start as a freshman. And I did end up doing that. And then I always bust Coach Brownell on this is after my visit, as the story's been told to me, Coach Brownell went into Coach Wainwright's office because out of high school, Larry, I was 6'2", 165 pounds. I mean, I was skinny upon skinny. I wish I was 100. I wish I was close to 165 today. But Coach Brownell went into Coach Wainwright's office and said, "Are we sure about this one?" And I don't blame him. Obviously, I love the man. And but yeah, that's how I ended up at Wilmington, and it was a great decision. We won the first 2 regular season championships in the history of the program. We lost in 2 conference championships to go to the tournament. We lost one year. My freshman year, we lost to VCU, and my junior year, we lost to John Beeline's Richmond team. And ironically, the best player in that Richmond team was a guy named Gerard Stevenson, who was a great player. And it was his son, Jaron Stevenson, that banged the 4 threes against us in the Elite Eight game. And so when I got about a week after we lost, I got a phone call from Coach Beeline, congratulating us. But then, again, I say this with love. Coach Beeline, like all of us coaches, they're always going to get their shot in, Larry. You've interviewed enough coaches. So Coach Beeline said, "Yep, you just couldn't beat a Stevenson again." I was like, "Coach, man, the wound is still pretty fresh. So I don't know if a week after." I said, I think you need to hold off on that one. But, life does come at you full circle. But that's how I ended up at Wilmington.
You took over for Brad at Wright State after he left for here. And just looking at it from the outside, you get fired after you tie for second in your league, 13-5 in the league, 22-13 overall in 2016. What happened there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was real appreciative of the opportunity that Bob Grant, the AD, gave me when they promoted me. And to be fair, this is not negative at all. Some of it is the job changed. 08, the economic downturn. I got the job in 2010. We were feeling it. So, when I was the assistant over 4 years, we only got bought twice, Wake Forest and Mississippi State. And we had $80,000 every year back then. That was a lot for that level to buy. We could buy other Division I games. And, when I took over in the very first meeting, hey, the economic downturn, we got to make some changes. And again, not negative, just, it's what happened. We need you to play 3 money games. So we had to get bought 3 times a year. That 80,000 we had to buy went away. And so the job got a little tougher, and it took me a year or two to really find my footing. I'd never been a head coach. I learned that there are things that I'm not as good as teaching as Coach Brownell was. And there's some things that I teach well, and I needed to figure that, some on-the-job training. And, My third year, my fourth year, we lost in back-to-back conference championship games to go to the NCAA tournament. My fifth year, my entire team got hurt. It's like nothing I've ever seen. We had 3 guys get in a car accident. They had to go to the emergency room. They're fine, big picture, but they missed several weeks. My best player had a season-ending injury the last regular non-conference game of the year against Ohio State. So it was a mess. And instead, if that team, my third year we won 23 games. My fourth year we won 21 games. That fifth year we won 11. If that team stays healthy, we're going to win 20 games again. And then my sixth year, we won 22 games, won 13-5 in the league. It's a pretty good track record. But at the end of the day, after my fifth season, I respect this. I think anybody wants to know where they stand. Bob called me in the office and said, you got to make the NCAA tournament to come back. And I appreciated that because I knew where it was. So I say that with as much positivity as I can. Again, life comes full circle. We finished second in the league. We get to the conference championship game. We have at that point, the second best season in the history of the school, besides my first year with Coach Brownell, where we went to the tournament. It's the second best season in the history of the school. And, very similar. I said this to Graham Neff in LA the morning after we lost to Alabama. Graham and I were just kind of the only ones down there at breakfast. And I thanked them because, after the 14-6 ACC year, Graham made a decision to bring us back. It certainly felt that way. And, he could have made the decision not to do that. And obviously, Larry, that decision has paid off immensely for everybody involved. It's a great decision because there's nobody that could have been hired that would have taken this team to the Elite Eight and done the things that Brad has done and is going to do. But I wasn't given that. I tell my wife, I said, honey, if we win 3 of those 4 years and go to the NCAA tournament, I might be coaching in the Big Ten as a head coach. I mean, that's our business. And so I hope you can hear it in my voice. I'm not bitter about it at all. I've had great opportunities, been really close to the mountaintop and just haven't been able to get over the hump. I wish I could tell you why we weren't able to win those championship games. And the hardest part about losing those championship games, because I lost 2 of them as a player, is that I had seniors lose 3 times in 4 years and never go. Mm. And that's something that you carry for the rest of your life, that you never got to play in the NCAA tournament. And it's always with you. So, they made a decision. When I'm proud of the roster we left them. When they made the change, I met with the team and I told everybody to stay. I said, if you guys stay, you're going to go to the NCAA tournament. They're going to hire a very good coach, but stay so you can go to the tournament. They went to the tournament the second year. And then the third year that under the new coach, they played Clemson in the NIT. The best three of the best players were guys I coached and recruited. And so we left the program. We've done a really good job. And sometimes, when a coach needs that extra year, they get it and it really pays off. And sometimes you don't get it. And that's our business. And I don't harbor any ill will at all. That's kind of the story though. That is, that's what happened. And then I went to Michigan. Coach Beilein hired me and went to Michigan. And that was awesome because I'd never coached at this level, at the ACC Big Ten level before. I'd never been at it. And that was a remarkable experience for me.
You mentioned Graham's decision to bring you guys back a year ago. Heading into this year's NCAA tournament, was there a feeling like among the staff, like we got to win a game at least or else?
Yeah, I don't, that was never talked about. So I think I think some of probably what helped with the Boston College was like everybody was just, as a staff, we were just so embarrassed that nobody was thinking about, 2024-25. Everybody was thinking about, we got to get ourselves right after Boston College, which Coach Brownell took care of to the best of any coaching job that maybe has ever been done. And, then obviously when we found out who we were playing, it was like, hey, we need to take care of New Mexico. And it really kind of gave everybody a laser focus. So I don't know. It was never discussed or talked about.
Billy, I asked for an hour, and I think I've exceeded that by about 6 or 7 minutes, so I apologize. But I could talk for a long time, but anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to share or anything?
That's a good one. I just think, Clemson's a special place, and there's great people. I think that all the things that Coach Brownell has accomplished here, from when it first started, a practice facility, now a second practice facility, courtside seats, the winning. I think if you're looking at it, it's really unfortunate, more for the kids than it is for the coaches, because the coaches get to coach another year, but the players don't get to play. The seniors don't get to play. I forget what year it was where they were like 31 in the net and didn't get in. And then obviously, a year ago we didn't get in. So it's two more teams. And, I think what Brad's done is really remarkable. As I said earlier, Larry, I want to emphasize to the fans that listen, the guys on this coaching staff, and that they're tremendous. Dick Bender and Sean and Jeff and T-Mac and Lucas McKay are tremendous, tremendous coaches. And Coach Brownell allows everybody to coach. Obviously, he is as good as there is. If you ask coaches around the country who are some of the best tacticians in the game, he's going to make everybody's list. And it's a great – Clemson is like no other place. I've worked – and this is not a knock on any other place I've worked. Michigan and Northwestern are special. John Beilein belongs in the Hall of Fame. So if you have a vote, Larry, please put him in. What Chris Collins has done at Northwestern is remarkable. Back-to-back NCAA tournaments, 3 tournaments, I think, in 10 years now, or maybe it's 11. Still amazing. But Clemson is just very special and unique because the people, the way the university is. I say this to our recruits and to their families. The Clemson has about, I just keep the numbers easy. There's about 25,000 people that live in Clemson. I know that's not exactly right. And there's about 25,000 students that go to Clemson. And I know that's not exactly right. But my point is, you really feel when you're here like it's one townsperson for one student. That's how special you feel at Clemson. And it's an incredible, incredible place. And we're all very lucky to be here. And we're excited about the future with men's basketball.
Well, congrats for a spectacular season, and look forward to more.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate your time, man.
Awesome stuff there from Coach Donlon, and also the sit-down that I mentioned with Brad Brownell from earlier this month. It was a 4-part series. Well, still is a 4-part series up at TigerIllustrated.com. If you haven't yet checked it out, it is a must if you are a Clemson basketball fan. Appreciate the support of our sponsors for continuing to help make this happen. And, of course, thanks to every one of you for making it a part of your listening routine. Really appreciate it. Cheers.